Extracting, manipulating, and graphing survey results. In this video, we're looking at extracting data that was collected from a survey using a Google form, manipulating or massaging that data into tables, and then graphing it to transform the data into meaningful information. The first step was to create a form, which you can see in front of you here, and it asks some basic questions: gender, age, where you were born, how many elementary schools you've attended, favorite subject, the subject that you're best in, and how many people live in your house. I then went ahead and randomly filled that form out 26 different times, so I had a bunch of data collected. And then when I go to the original form, I now have the Responses tab. I can click on Responses, and you get a summary of the responses that have been submitted. The next thing I want to do is click on Link to Sheets. What this is going to do is create a Google Sheet of the data that's been generated from the form. So I go ahead and I can go with the default here, which says Create a new spreadsheet, and I'll go ahead and click Create. Does that, and in this case my browser I have to allow for pop-ups, so I go ahead and do that. And it shows me all of the information that has been submitted. You can see that there are 27 lines in the spreadsheet now. The first line is the header, and then there are 26 lines of data. The header line includes each of the questions from your survey. So the next thing I'd like to do is start looking at the data and saying, well, okay, what is potentially interesting in this data? So the first thing I might want to pay attention to is maybe the age of my respondents. So the first thing I'm going to do is actually copy that information. So I clicked and dragged to highlight it all. I pressed Control-C, or you can right-click and say copy. Either way is going to work. And then I click on the plus sign to add a new sheet. And I'm going to rename that sheet as well, just to help me keep things organized. And I'll call that tab Age. And then I'm just going to press Control-V to paste the information that I had there. And maybe I don't want it there. I'm going to move it over a little bit just so I can put in some more things. Now I want to know the mean, the median, and the mode of all of the ages of the people who responded to the survey. To do that, that's fairly easy to do in Google Sheets. I can type in equals and then the word average, and it'll automatically select the data range that's above it. So I can press enter, and it tells me the average is 13.19, etc. I can do the same thing for median, and it jumps to median. Go type in that, and then same thing for mode. I put equals mode, hit the tab key, and it automatically fills it in for me. Once we've got the mean, median, and mode, because they all came out to be around 13, maybe something else might be a little more interesting. So how about a histogram? So we'll go ahead and select all of the data, click on Insert and Chart. By default, it jumps to being a pie chart, which is kind of doesn't really make any sense in this context. So I'm going to go ahead over the chart type and scroll down through until we come to, in the other category, we've got a histogram chart. I can click on that. The weird thing is that it picks up some strange numbers here. So we need to go into Customize, Histogram, and rather than auto for the bucket size, we're going to change it to 1. And now you can see here the 12-year-olds, the 13-year-olds, the 14-year-olds, and the 15-year-olds organized into the histogram. And then we'll go back and give it a title, which gives us a little better sense of what the students are like in the group that we sampled. Now let's look at students' favorite subjects. We'll click and select all of that data, click on the plus sign, create a new sheet, rename it, call it favorite subject, and paste in the data. Bold the heading just to make it easy to see. And now I'm going to highlight the data and click Insert Chart. And it gives us a pie graph for that by default, which is a fairly useful representation of the data. Now let's go and look at the gender of our respondents. So I'm going to go back to the first tab, And this time I'm going to go to the gender column. I'm going to select all of those. Again, Control-C to copy. Create a new tab. This time I'm going to rename it. Right-click and say Rename. Say Gender. Press Enter. And I'll go ahead and I'm going to paste the gender information there. Now, this is all kind of jumbled up. What I really want to end up with is a summary that says male, female, non-binary, and prefer not to say. And I'd like a total beside each of those. Now, there are a couple of ways of accomplishing this. The first and easiest way is to select all of the data, then go to the Data menu and click on Column Stats. So we can see we've got 10 female, 14 male, and 2 that prefer not to say. So male is 14, female was 10, 0 non-binary, and 2 prefer not to say. So now I've got a new table of data that I can work with. I can go and now say Insert Chart. And it gives me a chart of that data. And I'm going to tweak it a little bit. Go to the Chart Editor. Go to Customize, Chart and Access Titles, and I've got the chart title selected. So I'm going to call this chart Gender of Respondents. Now remember, one of the reasons we're looking at our data and doing surveys is to try to find connections between different questions that we're asking. We're looking for connections. Is there a connection between gender and a favorite subject? Or is there a connection between the subject that is their favorite and the subject that they get the best mark in? So those are the types of connections we're going to look for. So I'm going to go again back to my form responses. And this time I'm going to select the data from what is your favorite subject and what subject do you get the best marks in. And again, Control-C to copy. And once again, add another sheet. And this one we're going to rename to be subjects. And I'll paste that data back in there by doing Control-V, or you can always right-click and say Paste. I'm going to put titles in here just so I remember what they are. I'll highlight those in bold so I remember that they're headings. Now what I'd like to do is sort this data, give it some kind of organization. I'm going to click and highlight all of that content, go to the Data menu and click on Sort Range, and then go to Advanced Range Sorting Options. I'm going to click on it where it says Data has header row, because it does have a header. And you can see now the sorting fields change to whatever was in that header row. So the first thing I want to sort on is their favorite subject. And I'll go ahead and click on Sort. So you can see it's sorted it alphabetically. Art, Geography, History, all the language English responses, all the language French responses, then the math, and then the science responses. But if you look at the second column, you notice that they're kind of mixed up. They're in whatever random order they came in. So we can actually fix that when we go into Data and Sort Range and go to the Advanced Range Options. This time, we can click on this button that says Add Another Sort column. And this time, so it'll first sort on the favorite option. So it's going to first sort the first column. And then based on everything in that first column, it will look at what's in the second column and sort those. So when it's sorting the second column, it's sorting the second column in relation to what everybody had selected in the first column. So after it sorts everything alphabetically here, then it goes through each subject, and when it gets down to math, for example, it'll see there's art, math, science, math, art, language, math, and language French. It's going to reorder those so that the art is together, the maths are together, the science is together, and so on. So let's see how that looks. I click on Sort, and now you can see of the people who said math was their favorite, but they did best, there were 2 that did best in art. And the same for English, and same for language French, and then there's 4 that have math. So it just helps you to group the information together a little better, which allows you to come to summarizing the information as well. Now, I've got the data sorted, but it's still not giving me sort of any meaningful information. What I really want to know is, generally, of the people who chose a subject as their favorite, was that also their best subject? So let's see what happens. So I'm going to go down the list. I'm just going to do this manually and say, okay, if they said their favorite was art, but their best was language. So I'm going to say no there. Same here, geography and English, they don't match. History and history, they match. English and English, they match. English, English, they also match. Again, lots of matches there. Now I've got a summary column that's showing whether or not people chose their best subject as being their favorite subject or not. With that information, I'm going to go ahead and resort my table. And this time, I'm only going to be concerned with the third column. And I'm going to make a summary table. And then I'm going to go ahead and add up how many of each of those there were. Or I could go, just like I did previously, I could go to the data and go to column stats. Tell it to ignore the first row because it was counting the header. And I can see now that I've got 11 say no and 15 say yes. Those have all been fairly straightforward summaries of the data. Now I want to see, is there maybe some connection between the number of schools that kids have attended and whether or not they consider math to be their favorite subject. So I'm going to create a new tab again, go back to my original form, and I want to look at how many schools they've been to and what's their favorite subject. I'm going to copy that. Go back to schools and math and paste the data. And I'm going to use that same sorting technique that I just used on the previous tab. So I'm going to select all of the data, go to data, sort range, advanced. I don't have a header selected this time, but I'm going to sort on both columns and I'll click sort. So now I see how many schools they've attended and what subjects is their favorite. So let's focus just for the moment on students who have been to a single school. You can see that there are 9 students who have only been to one school, and out of that, 6 of them chose math as their favorite subject. Now, what else can we learn from this? Out of the 10 students who attended 2 elementary schools, 3 of them said English was their best subject, and 3 of them said science was their best subject. So of the 10 students who attended 2 schools, 3 said English was their best subject, and 3 said science were their best subject. So whereas in the students who had only been to 1 school, it was very clear that their favorite subject was math, for students who had attended 2 different schools, we didn't get the same clear message coming out as to what their favorite subject was. And for students who attended 3 different schools, we could summarize that to say, of those 7 students, 3 of them liked science. So we've come up with some kind of summarizing statements here. You may or may not want to turn those into graphs, or whether they are part of your main message or not, that's up to you to decide. You might want to graph them in some way, or you might not. If you wanted to graph them, you're going to need to summarize them into numerical tables like we did previously. But I think we'll just leave this one for now and move on to another area. In this case, we're going to be looking at whether they were born in Ottawa or not, and what their favorite subject is. So we're going to copy all those parts of the table, create a new sheet, paste in the data, highlight the header row just to keep it clear, and I'm going to delete this column because I don't really need that column. As we've done before, I'm going to highlight the 2 columns of data, go to the data menu, sort range, and go to advanced range sorting options. I'm going to tell I've got a header row, and I'm going to tell it to sort on both columns, and go ahead and click on sort. Now I'm going to summarize that data a little bit. So there's the born in Ottawa data, and I'll move over here to say not born in Ottawa. So we'll start with the born in Ottawa, that's the yes category, and I'm going to write down all of the subjects, and then the number of students that each made that selection. So I've got 1 geography, 1 history, 1 English, 4 French, 4 math, and 4 science. Now we'll do the same for the not born in Ottawa. And again, adding up each of them. There's 1 that chose art, 3 said English, 5 said math, and 2 said science. Now that I've got summaries of both sets of data, I'm going to highlight the data, go to Insert Chart, and it's wise enough to create a pie chart for me. I'm going to shrink it down a little bit in size, and then I'm going to go to the chart editor, edit the chart, and then go to Customize, Chart Access and Titles. Title is selected by default, and I'm going to say this is Born in Ottawa. Do the same now for the not born in Ottawa. Insert Chart. Creates a big chart for me. Reduce it down in size just for fun. I'm going to make sure it's the same size as the other one. And again, go to Edit Chart, go to Customize, Chart Access and Title, and call this one Not Born in Ottawa. And maybe we'll just move them around to associate them more closely with each of their sets of data. The next analysis I'd like to look at is comparing gender and favorite subject. So again, I'm going to select several columns and create a new sheet, paste in the data, and then delete the columns that I'm not interested in. As before, I'm going to go ahead and highlight the 2 headings and make them bold just to keep them more obvious. Now I'm going to do my sorting. Go to Data, Sort Range, Advanced Range Sorting Options, sort by column A and B, and click Sort. So now I have the females together, the males together, and the prefer not to say together. Now suppose I was interested in looking at gender and favorite subject. So let's see what I'm going to do with that. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to look at, I've got 10 female students, and 3 of them chose math as their favorite. And I have 14 male students, and 6 of them chose math. Once we've got the data sorted, we want to tabulate it into some different format so we get some numbers here. So I can see that there was 1 female who said art was their favorite subject, so I can put in a 1 there. Same for geography, there was 1. 3 said French was their favorite, 3 said math was their favorite, 2 said science, and nobody chose history and nobody chose English. In the males, the numbers were a little bit different. The 0, 0, 0, and 6 chose math, 4 chose science, 1 chose history, and 3 chose language, and the ones that chose not to say, 1 chose English, and 1 chose French. And after I've got all of the data added, now I'm going to go, and just for interest, I'm going to add a total line here, and we can say that's equal to the sum of everything that's above it, and copy that cell into the others. So now I have the totals for each column. I'm going to go ahead and graph that information. I'm going to ignore the totals for the moment, and say Insert Chart, and it's going to give me what it thinks is the best chart to show. So it's given me a stacked bar chart. Stacked bar chart isn't really what I was looking for, so I'm going to go ahead and change that to just a regular bar chart or side-by-side bar chart, like this. That's representing the data fairly accurately, but the question is, does it give me the right kind of message? Since we've got different numbers of males and females, naturally the bigger group might very likely have a bigger number of respondents in a particular category. So maybe what I should be looking at is graphing some percentages rather than the totals. I can refer back to these cells, so I'm doing some kind of fancy stuff here. Control Enter to use the autofill. Here, I want these numbers. Enter, Control Enter to autofill. equals. There, enter and control autofill. Insert chart. And it gives me a stack bar again. I'm not sure why it thinks that's a good choice, but it does. Let's go ahead and change it now to column chart, where we've got the side-by-sides. So in this case, working with percentages is probably giving us a better representation of what subjects are people's favorites based on their gender. And that wraps up a somewhat long video on extracting data that you collected with a Google form, manipulating or massaging the data, and graphing the data in order to transform it into more meaningful information.